there. I'm Amy Connell. Welcome to Graced Health, the podcast for women who want simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves and enjoy a little chocolate in the process. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach who wants you to know your eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do. As I have mentioned in the past, I attended college at Oklahoma State University, go Pokes, where I created some wonderful friendships and memories. I was relatively involved on campus as well, not like a super duper campus leader, but kind of like that middle of the road club girl, the one who would just sign up for things. And quite honestly, a lot of them were to try and buff up her resume. Yeah, that was me. But one of the organizations that I was more involved in, and it was a more meaningful involvement, was the Business Student Council. I was a finance major and was in the College of Business and got into the Student Council. And then I think it was maybe my junior year, I was elected to a leadership position. And I think I was elected like by default because I was the only one running. But regardless, I was in this leadership position. So one day, one Saturday, shortly after we were all elected, our advisor asked us to come in for several hours for something akin to strategic planning for the school year. I don't remember what he called it, but that was basically what it was. So this was in the mid-90s when companies were really adding a lot of mission statements and statement of values to all of their planning sessions, and they would display them prominently. And like this was a full-on thing in the mid-90s. And I know that I think they still exist, but this was, in my understanding, is it was somewhat new during this time. So, of course, being a business-related student organization, we had to model that. And our advisor asked us to come up with both a mission and a value statement. Well, let me tell you what happens when you get 8 opinionated, business-minded people together. They hash out everything, every word, every meaning behind the word, every way those words can be interpreted. And 3 short hours later, we had a 1-sentence mission statement. I kid you not. Our advisor, God bless him, had the patience of a saint as he just kind of quietly witnessed our conversation. He guided us here and there. It was probably something that he had practice of as a parent, and now I completely appreciate and understand that feeling of I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and coach him along when I need to, but for the most part, I'm going to stay out of it. Then, once we formulated that 1-sentence mission statement, he just very calmly said, well, I thought that would take about 30 minutes, but since it took 3 hours, we may not get to everything today. We didn't. I actually don't remember what happened the rest of it, but yeah, I think we pretty much used up all of our time or most of our time, and then we went home, and who knows, I don't even remember if we got together again. Now, in today's episode, I'm not going to talk about a mission statement because quite honestly, I don't have one, but I am going to share my statement of values. My promise is it will not take 3 hours. I've learned since then. But it did occur to me that I have, at this point, put out 176 episodes of the Graced Health podcast. And while I have known in my head what is important, you may not. Or if you are new to here, or if you're just trying to understand a little bit more about the Graced Health podcast and me and what I stand for, this might be a good place to do that. So I thought it might be worth formally identifying the values of this podcast and then just sharing them with you in this episode. These values are something I've kind of discovered as I have, quite frankly, stumbled my way through this podcasting experience. They aren't something that I necessarily identified from the very beginning, because as I have learned more about what you want to hear, things have just changed. But once I wrote them down, I realized that these were kind of here all along. And then, because I have had them written down for several months, I actually go back to them when making decisions about content here on the show and maybe opportunities beyond that, which I'll get to here in a second. Now, before I dig into these statements, I want to make sure you know about my new book, Your Worthy Body: Find Freedom and Health by Breaking All the Rules. This book is for women who are doing the best they can, because we all are, but they just get overwhelmed by all of the health, quote unquote, rules out there. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about when you see the headlines, when you see the morning show segments, when you see friends talking about things or the latest and greatest. And I use that in quotes again on social media. And there's just a lot out there. So what I do is I take my 17 years of experience as a group fitness or as a fitness professional. So I use exercise science, and then I'm also a certified nutrition coach, and I use that nutrition science through a lens of faith to debunk these rules and empower women to do what is best for them, not what a program or an influencer says. Next week, I'll be sharing the introduction and some other behind the scenes looks into the book. So make sure you tune in for the introduction next week. But I do want you to be aware of that, because I am in full-fledged, full-on launch season over here. And I think my family is really ready for me not to be talking about the book so much. Anyway, back to my statement of values. Okay, so it has been a really long time since my business student council days. So I don't even know if I'm doing this correctly. Like, how do you write a statement of values? I don't know. I just wrote down the words that I thought were important, and I dug into that. So let's jump into these. What I've done is identified 6 areas of value for the show. So each episode represents at least one of these values, and often many of them, but not all episodes encompass all 6 values, but they at least fit into at least one bucket. I tried to make a Venn diagram of how these could all be interrelated, and I guess I'm just not that smart. I don't know. Maybe I didn't do very well in that business class. But anyway, these are often interrelated, and you'll hear me talking about that. But these are the 6 statement of values for the Graced Health podcast. Let's dig in. Number 1, knowledge. I love learning. It didn't used to always be that way. In fact, when I look back at my days in college, I'm kind of regretful that I didn't have more of a focus on actually learning, and rather I just wanted to memorize and regurgitate for the test. I remember being so irritated by what I called the non-traditional students. So basically like women who were my age who had gone back to school because they were so thirsty for knowledge, for education, to learn. And they always messed up the curve, which was really annoying to me. But they could just really appreciated the value, and they loved learn. You could just tell they loved learning. I'm no longer immersing myself in business classes or business related stuff, with the exception of leadership podcasts and all of that kind of stuff. Instead, I am focused on learning all things health. Originally, I thought I'd really just focus on fitness, food, and faith. But since then, I have also learned I cannot ignore the mental health aspect of our health. And boy, is that something I am so interested in learning, just even for myself, if nothing else. I definitely know better now and completely understand that our mental health is every bit as important as the food that we eat and how we move our body. Every guest I bring on has a specialty in some area of our health, and then they teach me and teach you. Knowledge truly is power, and I feel like that phrase is way overused, but it is the truth. And I believe that knowledge and understanding more about how all of these things work together, our food, our faith, our mental health. I mean, there's so much more, but I believe that really empowers us to make the right decision for ourselves and for our loved ones. That's why sometimes I will bring on experts to talk about our children, because a lot of my community are women who have children, and they are just as concerned about raising strong, physically and mentally healthy children as they are about bettering themselves. So that's why sometimes we talk about our kids and not necessarily ourselves. But again, I know that we all want to make as good decision or as best of a decision as possible, obviously with an element of grace, which we'll get into here in a second. When we know better, we make better decisions. So knowledge is definitely a strong value of the Graced Health podcast. The second one is discernment. Now, I like to read my Bible. I like to learn from my Bible. And in there's a lot of discussion, or several times in scripture, that it talks about discernment and God giving us a spirit of discernment. And I believe he wants us to use the brain he gave us to determine what is best for our uniquely created bodies. And as the host and producer of the show, I'm highly discerning in all elements of it. I'm discerning with my guests that they bring quality knowledge in their particular field. The topics that we have are often inspired by conversations, comments, or questions I have or receive over email or social media or with friends. A lot of these just come up very organically. For example, anytime someone signs up to receive my monthly journals, I send them a welcome email. And I love putting together these monthly journals. But in that email, in the welcome email, is a survey. And so I invite people, I say, let me get to know you better because I want to know what is important to you. Those survey results that people have generously spent their 3 minutes and told me and filled it out, they tell me that I need to have more conversations on here about nutrition. I totally get it. There is so much information about food and nutrition and what to eat and how to eat and when to eat and all of that business. It's just sticky. It's just hard. I have been reluctant to have too many conversations about food because I don't want to muddy it up. But knowledge is important. And I know you have the ability to discern what is right for you and also what you can leave aside. I can't curate or heavily curate the content so much that it basically only applies to me, because what is best for me doesn't necessarily mean that it's best for you. So in future episodes, you can expect to hear more conversations about nutrition. And then of course that will be coupled with the reminder and just the atmosphere of discernment. Like, does this work for you? Think about this. How would this treat you? All of that kind of stuff. Another element of discernment that I employ is more on the operational side of this podcast. I receive DMs and emails all the time to partner or collaborate. Sometimes it's with other guests. Sometimes it's with or for particular products. I get a lot of people, wanting me to wear their leggings or something like that. And that's fine that they're doing that. And a lot of these products really look amazing, but I've passed on almost all of them because it's important to me that you see me as a content provider and that content is valuable to you. I'm not here to be an online influencer and make money off of product placement. Some people do that online. More power to them. That's great. But that's just not why I'm here, and I don't want to muddy that up. I'm also really discerning about monetization. This may be its own episode in the future, but at its core, there is no money in podcasting. I literally pay to podcast, something that they did not teach you in business school. Of course, I'm not even sure that they had podcasts when I was in college. But if we're talking about in the black and in the red, and in the red is negative numbers, yeah, podcasting on its own is in the red. I'm not against monetization, and people can they can monetize their podcast through affiliate marketing or through advertisements. And you've probably heard shows with this, and that's great. Again, I'm not shaming. There's no problem with it. I just right now have chosen not to do this. I'm not against monetization again, but right now I haven't found the right avenue for me. So I don't. I am exploring ways of helping to offset the nearly $200 a month in expenses that I have for this podcast. But right now, I just don't feel like I just have the right place. So I'm just not doing anything. I'm very fortunate in that my training revenue from all of the personal training clients that I have help to offset that. And then also those who have been generous enough to support me through buying me a coffee, that helps offset the expenses as well. And those are both deeply valued. And I'm especially super grateful for those who support me one time or on a monthly basis through Buy Me a Coffee. Okay, the third statement of value for the Graced Health podcast is diversity. And this is a wide breadth of diversity. Diversity in people, in theories of eating or movement or food. We've heard a lot more about diversity since the summer of 2020, which really that came on way too late. It has a strong focus right now, particularly as it relates to race, and for good reason, for really good reason, for way far too long. All spaces have not reflected the diverse background that America prides itself on. How many of us grew up hearing that America was a melting pot? But we did not see a melting pot worth of leadership and of positions of influence. And, I got to say, as a white woman, it is far too easy to let my implicit bias drive my guests. Now, if you're not familiar with that word or the term implicit bias, I talked about it some with Reverend Donna Owusu-Ansah back in, I can't remember when, sorry, but I will link that episode in the podcast. But basically that is unintentional and involuntary attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, our actions, and our decisions on an unconscious manner. So that was the best definition that I could find, and that's from Ohio State. I'll link to that article in the show notes. Now, how does that relate to this show? Well, if I am not intentional about displaying the diversity that is evident in all God's people, then I'm not fully serving all God's people. Now, I try not to make a big deal about this and about making sure that I have a diverse group of guests because it's just the right thing to do. It's just the right thing to do. So why would I tout that? But it is something that's important to me and that I try to be intentional about. Now, diversity, this aspect is also true in the application of our health. I want to have a diverse array of conversations around our movement and food because, again, there's no one right way to take care of ourselves. And we have that spirit of discernment. We can listen to something and think, that's interesting. I might try it. Or that sounds like something I might like to implement. Or we can say, not for me, moving on. But the episodes here are not like I said, a highly curated list of other things that I think that we should be doing, because really it's not about me. I am a conduit, and let's have some conversations and you can figure it out for yourself. The next statement of value is encouragement. One of the biggest compliments I receive from people when they have listened to the show and want to give me some feedback is, you make me feel like it doesn't have to be perfect. Yay! That is exactly how I want you to feel. It doesn't have to be perfect. And okay, I want to be really careful with my words here, but there are a lot of health experts and influencers out there. And many have wonderful, inspiring messages. I listen to many of them. I read many of their books. I think they have valuable, beneficial content. I really do. But what I have felt and witnessed is sometimes there is an unintended consequence of shame when we don't measure up to what our favorite health leader says we should be doing, or what that book says you should be doing with the first hour of your day, or anything like that. I want to be very clear, I'm not saying we should feel shame, but I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and whether or not they use that word, that is a prevalent feeling. So I kind of see myself standing in that gap of reading the book, listening to the super enthusiastic, motivational speaker, and where you are right now. I want you to feel like I am like right there beside you. And I'm just saying, it's okay. It's okay if you don't look like what you read in that fantastic book or what your Instagram influencer said. What's best for you right now? Let's figure it out and let's take that next step together. So I kind of feel like I'm in that space right there. So maybe it's trying a new movement or tinkering around with your eating, or maybe it's just trying a new way to take care of your mental health, because there are lots of different ways to do that. But I want you to feel encouraged with each episode. Like no matter what we're talking about, you in that episode going, okay, I can do this. And that's one reason why I try to give you what I call one simple thing at the end of each episode. A friend of mine calls it sermon in a minute. So it's like, let's take one really encouraging point, and it may not even be a summary, but it's just one encouraging point, or we might wrap up that whole conversation, but we take it into one memorable and encouraging statement that we can apply easily, because I want you to walk away feeling encouraged no matter where you are. Okay, then let's say, I think this is number 5, statement of values. This is no surprise if you've been listening a while, faith. I am a Jesus follower. In today's climate, that can be an unpopular thing to say, but I'm not going to deny my faith. And depending on your background in faith, you may come up with your own assumptions about that and what you think that means about me. So I'll say this, the only fair assumption to make about me being a Jesus follower is that I try to love others the way he did. I don't understand all of Scripture, but I do understand how loving he was, and I try to emulate that. Am I always good at that? No, especially with really slow drivers when I'm in a hurry. Seriously. My husband's like, Amy, you got to calm down. But anyway, it's a goal. It's a goal. Jesus probably would have been a lot more patient with slow drivers when he was here. Now, having said that, while faith is integral to what I do and to the message of this ministry, I also want it to be a welcoming space to all. Some conversations are more heavily weighted on Jesus with others, and I'm okay with that. The ones that may not have an element of faith have a strong element of other values I've mentioned here, oftentimes knowledge, but sometimes as something else. For some, this show is too Jesus-y, and for others, perhaps not enough. But it's authentic to who I am and to my personal faith and really how I try to live it out. So I am glad that you are here regardless of where you stand. And I want to be very clear that you are welcome here regardless of where you stand in your faith. But I will always say that I am a Jesus follower. Okay, sixth, the final statement of value for the Graced Health podcast will not be a surprise for sure. And that is, I'm going to let you think of it. Yeah, you probably got it right. Grace. It's the Graced Health podcast. I know, super cheesy. So obviously I can't have a statement of values for a show called Graced Health without having grace as a cornerstone. Personally, I need a lot of grace. I mess up a lot. I mess up as a wife, as a mom, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a human being. I mess up in podcasting. If you've been with me a while, you know I mix up my words. I have plenty of what Toastmasters calls filler words. So those are like, so, like, all of that kind of stuff. I also will say the wrong thing with the right intent. I think the internet called that in the early 2000s Bushisms. So I definitely have my own, well, we can call them Amyisms. I don't know, but I definitely have that. So I need grace for all of the times that I do that. I try not to overly edit the show because I don't feel like it is congruent with the message of the show to have a very highly edited episode when I'm talking about like, it doesn't have to be perfect. You got to give yourself some grace. So yeah, I leave a lot of that stuff in. Oh, that's a double clutch, by the way, in Toastmasters language. When you start something and then stop and then say it again, I say a lot of double clutches too. Anyway, I need some grace in my words here. And thank you for giving them to me. Now, another part of grace is, part of my journey has been learning to give myself grace when my eating or my movement or my body don't look the way that I think it should. So here's an example. This book launch season is bananas. I am, from the time that when this episode releases, I am 2 weeks and 2 days away from releasing this book. And oh my gosh, y'all, I'm tired and I'm going to take a break. I'm just going to tell you that right now. In December, I'm taking a break. No episodes in December. But I'm also backing off the really heavy workouts and I'm doing more gentle movements. I'm just trying to be gentle with my body. So I'm taking walks. I'm doing yoga. I am listening to some real spiritual music and really focusing on my breath. Now, is this how I want to always be moving my body? No, because I love sweating and breathing hard, but not right now. I'll get back to lifting heavy things later, but now this is what I need. I need grace in my movement because it's not the way that the books say, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because this is what I need right now. My food. Yeah, you know me. It ain't perfect. Yesterday, I pulled out a bag of Ruffles, dug into that just because it looked yummy. I really like Ruffles. I wasn't hungry. It wasn't tight. I thought, those look good. And then today after lunch, I had enough chocolate that I will probably need a nap soon after recording this. And, there's the whole body thing. I mean, yeah, I've made a lot of progress in being grateful for all it can do and all that I can do. And I've made a lot of progress with that, but it's still a journey and I still become entangled in body issues still every now and then. And if you're thinking, okay, what's the big deal about Ruffles and chocolate and your body? Like, Amy, just give yourself some grace. Yeah, you too, right back at you. Give yourself the same grace you would give your friend. Beginning in season 9, so that was kind of at the beginning of 2021, I've started having one solo episode a month that really focuses on grace-based health. So I try and get some knowledge out there, some information, and then I layer on this realness about it and this grace about it. So that is one way that I have been trying to apply grace to this podcast. I also carefully vet my guests to ensure that their message is consistent with this as well. So I'm not going to have anyone on here that comes on and says, this is what you have to do forever and ever, amen, because that is not congruent with the message of the show. I would like to think I'm not your typical health and fitness podcaster and writer. And that element of grace is a big part of what's different, in my opinion. Maybe you think it's something different, but I really think that overlaying forgiveness to ourselves for all of the things is a really important element and something that's not talked about enough. So that, and then, also like I don't wear sports bras and tiny shorts because I don't even do that in my own home. So you're not going to see those in any of my Instagram feeds. But anyway, okay, so there you have it. Those are the 6 values of the Graced Health podcast: knowledge, discernment, diversity, encouragement, faith, and grace. So if these sound appealing to you, you're in the right spot. And if you're just kind of kicking the tires on some of these, you're still in the right spot. You don't have to agree with everything that is on here. That's the great part. But P.S., that's also discernment. So use that discernment to figure out what is best for you and what you can apply to your personal situation. Now, finally, if you have a friend who you think might enjoy this type of grace-based, I have been saying graced so much that it's hard for me to say grace without the D at the end of it. Anyway, this type of content, I have a favor. Would you share it with her? You can either share the show, you can share this episode, you can share another meaningful episode to you. Word of mouth is quite honestly the most powerful way of sharing the show and of gaining visibility. There are 2 million podcasts out there, and this is one of them. So whenever you can get the word out, then to me, that is one step closer in us taking away so much shame and guilt and all of the other icky emotions that we often have about our body and our health. So sharing that is really helpful. Also, ratings and reviews on Apple are really impactful. If you are not sure how to do it, I understand it can be a little confusing. I have a link in the show notes. So just click on that link and it will take you to, it'll just go through and you'll be able to do it a lot easier than going on Apple and going through all that rigmarole. Cause I get it. Sometimes I'm like, how do I do this again? So it makes it super, super easy. Most importantly, make sure you purchase my book, Your Worthy Body, Find Freedom and Health by Breaking All the Rules, on November 4th. All of these values are threaded throughout the book, some more heavily than others, but all of these values, yes, they do. They filter into the book as well. I am super proud of this, which is a hard thing to say because, we grew up, especially if you're around my age in your mid 40s. I guess I'm closer to my late 40s now. But anyway, you grew up saying, oh, be humble, be, the humility, very important. And so it's hard for me to say, like, I'm proud of this, but you guys, I'm really proud of the content. I'm super proud of how it looks. And I can say that because I didn't do it. I had an interior designer, just beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I'm really excited for you to get this in your hands. The paperback version is way more beautiful to me than the ebook version, but we'll still have the ebook out there. And then you can tune in next week to hear me read the introduction. So if you're like, I don't know if I want to hear this, then listen to the introduction. And hopefully you're like, yeah, I want more of this. And if not, that's okay. It's not for everybody. It's definitely not, but I'm proud of it. And I think that it will be a wonderful complement to all of the topics that we talk about here on the Graced Health Podcast. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I know that, again, there are 2 million podcasts you can listen to, so I appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing all of that stuff. And I think that is it for today. Go out there and have a graced day.